The band has just released a new, or are you about to release, or have you actually already released the new album?
It comes out on the 13th of November.
Awesome. So you must be
Almost.
getting pretty excited then.
Yeah, we can't wait. It seems like it's been forever, so it's just we just want to get it out at this.
How long have you been working on this album? Because this is also your debut album, isn't it?
It is a debut album. It's interesting because so about 3 years ago, I was in the prog metal band Iris Divine, who is now signed to Sensory Records. Um, at the time, we were playing quite frequently and recording, and before then, I was also in like a progressive rock, progressive metal kind of band. So I just kind of grew kind of tired to it. I felt like I I did all I needed to do in that genre, and I really wanted to branch out and do other things. But being that we all have day jobs to kind of pay for life and pay for our you know semi pseudo careers as musicians as well, I didn't have that much time allocated to do that. So I felt that I needed a break. But I didn't want to just kind of abandon the band and say, well, I need some time off, and I know they wanted to move on, so the best thing for me to do was to leave. So initially, when I started this project, I was coming into it as a solo project, and it was supposed to be kind of popish and kind of like indie rock. As much as I hate that terminology to describe a genre of music, it's kind of strange. But so I wrote an album's worth of music that was nothing like this debut release. And so I wanted to bring it out live, so I got a couple of friends to kind of help me do that. And the music was quite synth heavy, so it was very kind of poppy. So we started booking our shows and went into the studio, and then we got the news that our keyboard player at the time wanted to leave to go to Los Angeles, California, to pursue music. So that was a big blow to us, just because the keyboards were such a big part of the music. So for the next year, we spent just trying to find a replacement for him, to no luck at all. So it was quite frustrating. But at that point, enough time had passed since leaving my prog metal band that some of those influences started coming back again, and I started writing with a little bit more distortion again, and those heavy influences started creeping their way back into my music. So I just decided, you know what, maybe I should just scrap this whole project and just start all over again. So that process took about 2 years. So then the actual music that's found on this record was started about 2 years ago. Um, and a similar thing happened. We started writing and was getting ready to book our shows, and our drummer had to leave. So then we spent time looking for a drummer, and it was a very frustrating period. So at that time, because we were drummerless, that's when I hired Travis Orban to play drums, as well as Mark Zonder. And then during that time, we got a drummer. So he played the remaining songs that weren't tracked yet, which were about 3 songs. And then he left again. And then by the time he left, our original drummer moved back. So then we were finally a band again, but he didn't play any of the songs just because everything was already tracked. So that took a span of the whole process took the time of about 3 years up until right now, actually. So it's been a quite frustrating 3 years putting this thing out. So right now at this point, we just want it out, just like, here, listen to it. And yeah, it's just kind of like, imagine a mother holding a baby in for 3 years. She just wants that thing out now, like, you know.
Well, that's it, and also the fact that I mean, what you scrapped the whole album and have come
Yeah,
back with something new. I mean, dude, that's made it. I mean, that must be quite a mission.
it was. Yeah. At that point, it was just kind of like, I just need to release this. If anything bad's gonna happen to me, if I get hit by a truck or anything, please just let it happen after I release this. I just need this thing out. So it was quite frustrating. So now that hopefully that doesn't happen when it releases. But it feels good to just be able to have it done, and now we can focus on writing new material and focus on playing live and stuff like that. So yeah.
Excellent. So, could you tell me a little bit about the album cover, and then a little bit about the album theme?
Yep. So the name of the band is Shumaun. It's a Sanskrit word in origins from India, which kind of roughly translates to calm mind or peaceful mind, which kind of embodies the band in itself. Lyrically, I'm the lyricist. A lot of my lyrics have a kind of spiritual or meditational quality about them. Dealing with like people interaction, our energies, and how we relate to one another. So a lot of that translates to the music. And so I hired an artist to kind of capture that vibe. His name was Kai Caldas from Brazil. And I thought he did a wonderful job with the artwork. It was very striking and very detailed. So it kind of encapsulates that kind of feel of meditation and spirituality that we kind of embrace.
Yeah, well, that's it, and then it's got the city underneath, which is really quite interesting because I guess it's like finding that place within the metropolis, I guess.
Yeah, so that's basically, we get so engulfed in our everyday lives. Everybody's got a million things to do, and a lot of times we don't just step back a little bit and take a deep breath and, just embrace the now that, you're alive, we can do things, we're breathing, we have the ability to do such amazing things, but we forget because of our day to day, like, oh, we've got to pick up the kids, or I've got to go grocery shopping, or I have to go to work and get all this done. It's sometimes hard to just kind of take a break from that and just kind of get away from the city, maybe just go outside to nature and just kind of take it all in and appreciate everything that has been, that you're blessed with or given to by whatever means that you believe in. It's just nice to be able to take a break from the city chaos. As humans, we're not meant to just sit at a desk for 12 hours a day and then just eat a meal and go to sleep. So we're not wired like that. So it's nice to take a break and just kind of embrace your natural characteristics.
Oh, well, that's dead right, and from my own personal experience of listening to the album, I must say I felt extremely relaxed after listening to it. I was quite surprised,
Oh, wow.
and and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that was one of the things I was like when I was sitting here thinking about what I was going to talk to you about. And it was like, well, that was something that the first thing that sort of struck me. Sure, I did listen to it at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I found it to be incredibly relaxing, and it put me, I wouldn't say to sleep, but it put me into quite a quiet place. And I was like, yeah, I like that.
Oh,
So,
great.
yeah. So, no, I mean, it definitely comes out through the music. So, that's one thing I noted, and I thought, oh, dude, that's bloody awesome. And it's not very often that you find that in metal. So,
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, that means a lot. It's always interesting because we're engulfed in writing this music and writing the lyrics and whatever message that we're trying to send out. That for the past 3 years, it's been all internalized. That finally, even though the album's not out, I mean, we are sending it out for reviews and for promotional materials to send to people, and it's kind of refreshing to kind of hear people's take on the album now. It's kind of like, okay, now it's coming back full circle, you send it out and you're just waiting for that echo to come back to you. So it's kind of cool to hear people say these different things of how they took in the album and their stories of, how they view it. So it's very cool. I'm glad that it put you to sleep in a good way rather than, oh my God, this is the boringest thing I've ever heard in my life.
well, no, not at all. I mean, I mean, dude, to get all the way through it, I mean, you've got some long tracks on there. And it was
We
like when I
do.
sat, and that, I mean, that second to last one, which is 13 minutes, it was like, oh, this is going to be interesting to see how long this captures my mind,
Yeah.
and that was cool. I mean, I actually really enjoyed that, and yeah, it was one of the things that because quite often, I mean, you look at the new Maiden album, and they've got that hugely long song, and it's like, well, okay, can you keep my attention for that long? And that's the key to, if you're going to do these sort
Right.
of songs, you need to be able to. I mean, whether it's to relax somebody, which is what I found from your music, that still it serves that purpose, if you know what I mean.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I think it's strange because that song it wasn't planned to be like, hey, we have to put in a 13-minute epic on the record or anything like that. Like you said, you plot out the time first and then just kind of fill the space in between to meet that time, which we found surprisingly a lot of bands tend to do that. Like it's kind of backwards. Like, okay, we need a long song in here, so we have to write a long song to just to meet that quota of to get maybe
Yeah.
a prog community or whatever. Um, they'll jump to that track first. Like, okay, let's see what this band is about. Let's put in that epic and see what it's about. It was one of those songs that just kind of came out. And we actually, I mean, like me personally, I was like, okay, it's 15 minutes. I've got to cut something from this thing. And that's the edited version, honestly. And it wasn't anything that was premeditated, like, okay, we're putting in a long song. There's another long song in there. It's not quite as long, maybe about 9
Yeah.
minutes or so. It just happened to be that way. If you notice, it's contrasted with songs that are, 3, 4 minutes long. So,
Oh yeah, definitely, and that was the thing. Yeah, it was like when my first thing was to look at the tracks and all that sort of stuff, look through the names, and then the links popped out, and it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be interesting because this is an album that's over an hour. I mean, and you contrast that with some of the things like some of the Slayer albums where they're
right.
tracking in at like 18 minutes or
Yeah.
30 minutes, and it's like you know. Uh, uh, Short songs are all good and everything, but there's nothing wrong with a bit of substance. And yeah, I mean, dude, if you can, if a song, I mean, because that's the thing. I mean, you can't dictate really how long a song's going to be because I mean, when you're writing it, I mean, it comes out as one thing, doesn't it? Whether it be 30
Exactly.
minutes
Yeah.
or so. Yeah. And that's, I guess, where a good songwriter and that comes to their fore when they can, when they just let those sort of things happen and they come out, like that.
Yeah, I mean the best songs are the ones that were written in like 4 or 5 minutes for some of these people. You hear these great stories of songs like Imagine from John Lennon or any of these songs. They just happen to get in front of a piano or a guitar, play a couple chords, and a song was just born right then and there, and they become these iconic songs. So it's like I find with myself if I spend too much time on a song, more than likely it's going to come out like crap. It's just going to be horrible because I'm just trying too hard.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones that come out a little easier, I know it's more natural and it's more honest that way, and I feel that's when it can touch an audience just because it's more real versus I need to put in 14 time signatures and I'm only on my third time change at this point, or I need a key change here just so I can say I have a key change in a song. I let the song dictate itself rather than me dictating where I want um, like a certain time to go or whatever. A lot of the times I don't even know the time signatures that I'm writing in. It naturally tend to write just odd stuff. Um,
Oh, that's awesome, mate. I mean, because dude, you've got what I like to describe as flavor and color within the album, and that's it. There's all sorts of interesting things in there if you listen, and that was where I was going to lead on to one of the next questions, and that is about influences, because I mean, you've got some interesting influences in there that are not just I mean, well, they're musical, but if you know what I mean, they're not just like tied to a genre, if you know what I
right.
mean.
Yeah, definitely. Just out of curiosity, is there anything that popped out to you that you may tie
Well,
to a
just some
band?
of the things that well, it was actually more some of the cultural sort of stuff,
Right, right.
um, where there was some of the European and Middle Eastern sort of sounds that were coming through there.
Right. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of influences that were used to put this album together. I listen to a lot of world music. Um, I listen to a lot of Indian music, Indian classical music. I don't bring so much of the Indian classical music in as far as I just don't have the ability to do that. I wish I did, but I mean, there's elements of the Indian classical stuff that I bring in, a lot of the vocal stuff and some of the vocal phrasings. I try to emphasize some of the intricacies of the way an Indian singer would sing. As far as traditional Western music, we're all big fans of Rush, Pink Floyd, and that 70s prog kind of movement. Um, Tool was a big influence on all of us. Bands like Yes. But for me, I also listen to a lot of pop music. Not so much like the Britney Spears and stuff of modern times. I don't even know if she's modern anymore. Actually, there's probably a million new Britney Spears now. I really don't follow that. But a lot of pop music from the 80s, um, it's just kind of like, I'm a child of the 80s, so that kind of stuff just kind of, I'm ingrained with that. And I could just, like the catchy hooks and stuff like that. I think that probably all came from 80s music, really. I mean, because all across the board, even like the metal music from the 80s, they had these big, huge anthemic choruses, which, the same thing goes for pop music and the new wave stuff. And a lot of that, I think, carried over into my writing, regardless if it was a hard rock song or a metal song or, like an alternative kind of song. I like melody, so I put a lot of emphasis on the stylings of how the voice phrases itself and the melodies that are used to just kind of capture an audience. Something a memorable hook, if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I was reading something that you wrote the other day, and that was about Tears for Fears album.
Right. They're a huge fan of mine. I love that band.
Excellent. Well, that's it, and I'm actually quite similar in that sense that I was a child of the 80s too. So, although I love my metal, I do love some of that old stuff that was, and that was when pop music was a little bit different then too.
Yeah, I mean, it was the artists wrote their songs. They played instruments, and I mean, granted, in the 80s we did have manufactured musicians as well, but a lot of the pop stuff, they were honest bands. They played their music, they toured the clubs, and did their time, and they just happened to make it. A band like Tears for Fears, I think they just get pushed into that category, but a lot of their deep cuts, they're intelligent lyrically, they're intelligent, and there was so much substance in the music. A lot of people would just equate Tears for Fears to like Shout, and songs like that made them superstars. Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which I think is a fantastic song, but the deep cuts on those records were amazing to me, and I like every single record they ever put out. Like, that's the kind of band that I wish I can be in, but it just that was definitely one of my favorite bands of all time, Tears for Fears, which is strange considering the kind of music that I write, but yeah.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it's like, I'm a hardcore metalhead, but I went to a show 3 years ago with Neil Young.
Right.
And it was probably one of the greatest shows I've ever been to. And dude, that guy wiped the, he was amazing. 3 hour show, whereas you go to see a lot of the metal bands these days, and you get an hour out of them if you're lucky.
Right,
and it's
right.
Yeah. Dude,
and don't get me wrong, I'm a metalhead as well. I love heavy metal music. It's just lately I haven't found a lot of contemporary bands that move me as much as the ones that I grew up to, and it may just because that's what comes with age. You start shutting down. But I've definitely a lot of the contemporary bands that have that metal label kind of shifted their sound as well. Like, I love Anathema, more so their material now than their previous when they were more metal, I guess. Now they have a kind of Pink Floyd-ish kind of sound, and that's a band that I love right now that I listen to all the time. And a lot of like Catatonio, I love those guys a lot. So it's metal, but it's a kind of soothing metal to me. I don't know. It's very melodic metal. So a lot of the melodic metal bands I'm not a big fan of power metal, but the bands that are kind of dark, I'm a sucker for. And there's a lot of contemporary bands that fall under that category. But as far as like the Maidens and Queensryches, and I just haven't found their contemporary rivals that I find that kind of moves me like those bands did.
Oh no, you're quite right. I mean, because I agree 100%. It's very difficult to find some of these newer bands that are doing things that are all that inspiring. I mean, because that's what I mean. The first time you heard Maiden with Number of the Beast, it was like, dude, it sort of flicks that light switch on.
It just blows you away. It's amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I was even talking to Martin from At the Gates, and we were talking about the same sort of thing. And it's like, there is something, I wouldn't say missing, but it's just they haven't quite risen to that same level yet. But I
Right.
guess it must be quite difficult with the way the social media and how that's changed the whole
Yeah,
scheme
I
of
think
things.
I think that's a big part of it because when we were younger, we weren't immersed with that many bands. So Iron Maiden could put out a couple songs that you weren't the biggest fans of, but you'd give it more of a chance just because you didn't have a myriad of a million bands that were, getting getting exposure that you had to choose from. Like the new wave of British heavy metal. If there was a new wave of British heavy metal now, there would probably be like 600 bands in that movement, whereas back then there wasn't that many. So I felt like maybe people attach themselves more to bands than they do now because there's so many bands that you can say, well, I like this band, but half their material I'm not that fond of, but there's another band that kind of like soothes that itch for me, and there's that you can pick and choose. You don't really listen to a lot of kids don't listen to the whole albums like they did before. Like I remember just buying the album, putting the headphones on, reading the liner notes and the lyrics, and just getting lost in the music. Um, it's a different situation now, and it's not bad or good, but it's just different. And I think that may just be a generational thing. I don't know if I'm just tied to the past in that regard. And a kid will just come up to me and be like, "Oh, you have no idea what you're talking about. I love music, and this is just the way I appreciate it versus the way I appreciate it." It's just kind of different, not so much bad or better or worse. My old man mentality thinks it's kind of worse, but who am I to say anything really?
Oh, I mean, I personally, I agree with you on a lot of that, and I mean, as a child, I remember, well, even as a growing up, I remember buying an LP or going and buying the latest tape from and the first thing you do is, like you say, put on the headphones, put it in the tape deck or whatever, and you'd sit there and look through the cover while you're listening to it,
Yeah,
and that was it. I mean, it was like back in the days when you learned about what the influences and that of the band were by the liner notes and who they were thanking, and it was
yeah,
like it was things like that because nowadays you just look it up on the net and there's a whole big spiel about the band, or
yeah.
back in
It's
the
just
days it was
it felt more special to me then. I guess that's the word. Like like I love like I was saying, Anathema. I love that band. And I listen to them a lot. But then when I pick up an old Iron Maiden record, and it just may just be because it brings back a certain time period of my life, when we were younger, and we have all these memories tied to that. That when I pick up, let's say, Power Slave, it just brings all that back. So therefore, I've got that emotional attachment to it now versus a newer band. I won't have as much of an emotional attachment to some of the things that I listened to while I was growing up and kind of developing my own identity as even a listener, and then later as a player of music. That may tie a role to it as well. I mean, some of these kids that listen to the music now, regardless of how they're ingesting it, I'm sure are going to feel the same way when they're 30. They'll be like, "Oh, this band, changed my life." And it'll just be different than my story, but that the repercussions of it would be similar, maybe.
oh, hopefully, mate, because I mean it would be sad if we lost that. um
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I mean, I guess part of it was also the physicality of having something in your hands
right.
rather than it just being a file on your computer
Yeah,
or on your mobile or whatever. So it's completely changed.
yeah.
Um,
It's hard to own things now. Everything is just kind of floating around in the cloud, and as long as
yeah.
it's available, it's there. Nobody feels the need to actually have that tangibility of. I don't even know if that's a word, tangible, but the tangible nature of the music itself is kind of lost.
Yeah, I know. I can't agree more. Very good. Okay. Well, we should wrap it up now. I've got one last question for you.
Sure, sure.
Actually, no, I lie. I always do this. I've got two more for you. One is touring.
Yeah.
Touring. Are you going to be getting out? Do you get out much from the States? Do you head off to Europe or that sort of thing? Or
We
what?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. You can finish the question.
No. Well, that was the guts of it. But I mean, do you guys get out? Do like through Australia and all that sort of thing, and through Europe, or do you just is it a local thing at this point?
At this point, right now, it's a local thing. Just because financially, it just wouldn't be viable to. I would love to make it out to Australia. That would be fantastic, or anywhere in Europe. At this point, being that I mean, we're a brand new band. We don't even have a record out. So at this point, we're just starting locally and just kind of getting used to the scene here. And then, we plan on hopefully doing some East Coast tours of America. As far as making it out to Europe and Australia, if we get that chance and it's financially viable for us, we would love to. We wouldn't not do it. Let's say that. Yeah, I mean, we would love to come out there if we were given a chance to, without having our bank accounts erased.
It's all right. And I'm way down in New Zealand, so it's even more difficult down here to get bands to come. So there's far and few between down here, but we're pretty lucky. Just talking about your band, Anathema, they're actually down here in the next week or two, I think.
Oh wow, yeah. I haven't had a chance to hear them live. They came here, and I forget, but I remember I had plans and I couldn't go, and I was very disappointed. But I hear they're amazing live, and I would love to see them when they come back around here. If we were able to go to New Zealand or Australia, you can just pretty much say I feel like I made it, because if I can play a show and people know and are awaiting to even hear any of my music in Australia, that would be good enough for me. Cause
Excellent.
yeah, yeah, because I'm not, we're none of us are doing this for financial gain. If anything, we're losing money, like most musicians, honestly. It's sad to say, because like, we have friends that some would say have made it, and in the 80s, you would definitely say they've made it. But after they come back home from tour, they have to have these side jobs just to support themselves, and it's kind of sad, that whole the nature of the music industry now. It's like everybody gets a guarantee, but the musicians that create the music, which is kind of odd. But it's kind of the scenario now, so it's kind of a sad situation. But yeah, I would love to make it out to Europe and Australia if we had that option too.
Excellent. Oh, hopefully some promotions out there will pick you up for some festivals or something like that. Be bloody great.
That'd be fantastic.
Excellent. Okay, for the last question, words of advice for young musicians.
Word of advice for young musicians, I would say practice. Um, get get your chops up to wherever you want to be. It doesn't have to be a million notes per second. Do You'd want to practice the craft of writing songs if you want to be a songwriter. If you want to just be a guitar player that just knows how to play lead guitar, just listen to the players that you like, and then listen to their influences and so on, so you can get a whole spectrum of different kinds of music that inspired that one player that can then inspire you. I think a lot of people, they rely on computers for music. I've heard of, like, metal bands will program their drums completely on the computer and use Guitar Pro to put in the guitar parts, and there is definitely a creative element to that. I won't deny that. But to be able to actually play your own music with a musical instrument like a guitar or a piano or drums, to sit there and learn the craft, I think is very important. And it's a whole different kind of emotional gain that you can get from doing that. And then after that, as long as the music is good, any kind of marketing and promotion can only help. Versus if you're trying to promote and market music that's kind of subpar, that's not quite there yet, you can't really get so far now, especially nowadays where the market is so saturated. So I would say just pick up your instrument of choice and just practice, 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 regardless of what genre it is that you're trying to pursue.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I